Get internal here because and I talk about this a lot on the show, is that the show's called Relationships at Work, but the number one relationship we have to have is with ourselves, because
Amen.
that fuels everything else. So as leaders ourselves, are there any warning signs that we may be needing to pay attention to around wellness before it starts impacting everybody else?
I love it. I'm gonna use for some of your audience members, what I'm about to say will resonate, and for others, it may feel like crazy talk. It's going to sound a little woo-woo, something that I've learned. For many of us, we are trained and learned as professionals to really rely on what I would say our mind and intellectual, right? So we're in our heads a lot and we're thinking. So what I'm going to say that's a bit provocative is to understand wellness, we have to get into our bodies. Now that's going to sound crazy, but what do I mean by that? If you talk to any neuroscientist, any therapist, any psychologist, any leadership person, they'll tell you our body is one of our greatest signals of how well we are. What do I mean by that? The first thing is to listen to how you're feeling. If you're feeling stressed, if you have this stress hormone in your brain kicking off called cortisol, it means you're in what's called a fight or flight response. When you're in a fight or flight response, by definition, you're not going to lead very well at work. And sadly, for most of us, probably 70, 80% of a lot of our lives, we're in this fight or flight response, and we're not going to be able to make good decisions. We're not going to be able to collaborate well. We're not going to be able to have positive impact when we've got cortisol constantly going through our brains. So the first thing is to listen to your body. What are you feeling? Is your throat clenched? Are your palms sweaty? Is your stomach going in knots? What does that tell you? Maybe it tells you you are in a very inspired setting and you're really excited because you're about to go on stage and everything's great. Or maybe it tells you you're in an environment that's not in alignment with your values. Maybe it's telling you that the relationship you have with your boss could be improved. Maybe it means the relationship you have with your colleagues is not great. I think if a lot of us slow down and listen to our bodies, it will tell us a lot that we may not be acknowledging. Yeah, let me pause there because I get very passionate on these topics.
No, I appreciate, and also understanding. I mean, I go back to my baby, which is definitions. Like, I love the idea of definitions. And if you can even define, by knowing yourself, self-awareness, what the difference between adrenaline, to your point about going on stage or presenting, versus anxiety, because it may feel similar to someone who doesn't know the difference between the two, or themselves well enough to know what they're, because you don't want to label things that are negative when it's really just an uncomfortable, versus uncomfortable it should be motivating, versus uncomfortable meaning you should run.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a great example, Russell. It's like thinking about two different scenarios. I am nervous, but in a good way, because I'm about to go on stage, like I'm a performer, right? So I'm excited. I can't wait to go on, but I'm a little nervous. Versus I'm standing outside the door of the CEO and I feel dread. Completely different feelings, right? And getting in tune with your body, which I know sounds woo-woo, is a key way to understand how well am I, right? Another great way is, I talk a lot about as a coach about this idea of listening. In this case, the reason I'm bringing that up is listen to what people are saying to you, around you. You know, some of the most instructive things about when I was not well actually came from somebody else around me, because I couldn't see it. And people would come up to me and say, Stephen, are you okay? You seem a little stressed, right? Or you don't look so well. Have you been sleeping okay? And of course the answer was no. But I'd been so stuck in it, in whatever situation was, I didn't acknowledge it.
Right. How do you keep accountable to yourself? Like, I do this in a way of asking myself. I ask myself a lot of questions when it comes to just sort of having these inner dialogues with myself. It can show up as meditation. It can just show up as a quiet moment, whatever it is. But I ask these questions of myself to understand where I am. How am I going to react? What's the best way to react in these certain circumstances? But in the idea of wellness, is there conversations we could be having with ourselves, questions we could be asking ourselves to just sort of recalibrate? I get it from listening from the body, but I also want to sort of look at it from a cerebral sense.
Yeah, so I love it, because in the lineup of work that I do my best to walk the talk, and I'll explain what I mean. So as a coach, I will tell you, no surprise to you and your listeners, one of the biggest things I hear from the leaders I support are challenges around this very topic, wellness. Now, usually the way they articulate it are things like, hey, Stephen, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling stressed. I don't know if I can keep going. And now they could be talking about a relationship. Most of the time they're talking about a professional challenge. And inevitably we get into what I will call identifying for them. So having them define in their own words what wellness would look like if they could get from where they were, overwhelmed, not sleeping, feeling stressed, to a place of wellness. And often what we talk about, and this is my own metric for myself to answer your question, is, and again, this is going to feel a little woo-woo, mind, body, spirit criteria, scorecard, if you will. So your listeners probably know all about the KPIs or metrics, right? In my case, I have 3 metrics I hold for myself: a mind wellness, a body wellness, and a spirit wellness. And I'll define what they am, and then I hold myself accountable on a daily and a weekly basis. And then I say to my clients, let's explore what those could be for you and how you're going to hold yourself accountable. So for me, mind, I know that for me to feel well, I need to be intellectually challenged. So throughout a given day, a week, quarter, challenge, I have metrics for myself of how much I'm doing that. What does that mean for me? Am I reading? Because I know that's an intellectual challenge. Am I engaging myself with learning new things that are stimulating? I run a business, right? So I have a bunch of metrics around the mind, keeping myself challenged. I like to meet interesting people like you and have interesting challenges. What happens when I'm not doing that? I start to feel foggy. I start to feel alert. I'm not intellectually engaged. And I know that signal, which tells me I need to re-spark my brain. I have a body metric. What does that mean? I know that for me to feel well, I need to be doing something physical. In my case, I've defined that to be getting outside and running. I like to run or take the dogs on a walk. So I say, okay, Stephen, when was the last time you ran? 48 hours ago. Okay, it's time to run. Doesn't have to be a marathon, but I run. Third metric is spiritual. And in this case, I define it as music or spending time with family. When any one of those is out of alignment, I start to not feel well. I feel dragging. I'm, all of those things that I think a lot of us. So I then keep myself accountable on a calendar, right? I'm big about accountability. And I'm like, okay, Stephen, it's been 3 days since you've done, running, music, or spent time with your family. No wonder you're feeling crappy, right? You got to go out there, especially when you don't want to do it. I do the same thing with my clients. It's not about me telling them what they should go do. It's about, how do you define wellness? And they might say something like, oh man, I love fishing. Like, okay, what are you going to commit to? And they're like, I'd like to maybe go fishing over the weekend. I'm like, no. You're going to commit to yourself and me right now that you're going to go fishing over this weekend. And you're going to text me that you went fishing at 3:00 on Saturday. I'm like, okay, Stephen, I'll text you. It's things like that ultimately define wellness.
But there's a lot you can't control. So we're talking a lot about what we can control, and that's absolutely where any leader should start. Yourself, your relationships, your reactions to things. Mm-hmm. But going into that community piece, there are a lot of people around you, a lot of people you interact with every day, your bosses. I use the term boss, not leader, for a particular reason. And in that, there are things you can't control and impact that wellness, regardless of what boundaries you've set up. How do you handle that? Or is there is it fight or flight in that, sorry, you've tipped over a boundary, I have to quit now? Or is it sort of a spectrum?
I love it. And that's a great point, because a lot of people, that's real, right? You say, okay, I'm going to go for a run during lunch. And then your boss says, no, you're not. You're going to come with me in a last minute meeting. What do you do? So the answer to your question in my mind is it goes back philosophically to what can you control? And then the answer is agility. That's part one of the answer. And then part two of the answer is what I'll call making it up to yourself. So let's walk through this scenario. So you've committed to yourself, you're going to go on a run at lunch, but your boss calls you at 11:45 and says, no, I need you in this meeting. And you're not going to, he doesn't know, but you're not going to go for that run. Right. So you say, okay, what can I control? I can't control my boss, just blew up my lunch plans. So what am I going to do? I'm going to be agile. I'm going to say yes to my boss, of course, and then I'm going to make it up to myself. I was going to go grocery shopping at 6 p.m., but you know what? I'm going to throw that out the window because I made a promise to myself that physical wellness is important. So I'm going to go for a run at 6:00. And I'm going to be agile, but I'm not going to kick the can down the road, and I'm not going to say, oh, well, I guess I'm just not going to get to this. That's the key. It will require some hard trade-offs. So it will say, I was going to do X, but because this commitment I made for myself is so important, I'm going to have to say no to something else. That's the key. That's the key. The big part of strategy, by the way, and wellness in my mind is about trade-offs, right? So instead of doing X, I'm going to do Y instead.
And I think that sounds great. And the reason I'm going to kick the tires of that one a little bit too is then, but where's the line in that? Because in my brain, I'm thinking of things like the term technical debt when you get into agile work and so forth and project management. But I love the idea of it getting into cultural debt. And basically what we're talking about is wellness debt. So
100%.
we keep going, we'll do it later, we'll do it later, we'll do it later. But then that starts building up. And that commitment of that habit we wanted to build of meditation or running every day goes from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, is becoming less and less because we keep saying yes or keep allowing these things we can't control to keep pushing these. Like you say, don't go grocery shopping, you're gonna have to run. No, you do need food. Your kids need food. So eventually you are gonna have to go grocery shopping, and that might need to be prioritized. So how do you handle wellness debt? Because it's not, it can become a problem.
The answer is a choice.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's about a choice. And look, again, and with some agility, so you can say, look, and I say this a lot to my clients, you have to be agile with what shows up, right? So the boss blows up your lunch plans, great. Then you say, okay, I'm gonna run at 6, but then you've got to take care of a child or go grocery shopping. Understood. So you're agile. In the broader scheme, though, after 2-3 days, maybe a couple weeks, couple months, couple years, you start to have to listen to yourself and say, but what am I giving up? Or what am I trading off? I support a lot of leaders that are in jobs that are no longer fulfilling. And I say, what has this cost you? So to put it in terms of this podcast, you're in a wellness debt. What is this costing you? It's costing me my health. It's costing me my relationships at home. I had a coaching call with a client last week and he says, I haven't seen my son and it feels like I haven't seen my son in 3 months. And I'm like, and how do you feel about that? So then you say, it comes back to a choice. And then we have a hard conversation about continuing to look for opportunities to set boundaries at work. And if that's not possible, then we say, what is in your control? One of the things that's in your control is making a different choice about a role, a position, a job. That's within your control. Now, a lot of people say, oh, not really. And I challenge them. I say, yes, it is. And I talk about, because a lot of people say, I could never get a job. I couldn't leave this industry, blah, blah, blah. And then I review with them because I can be objective. Like, let's look at your experience. You have amazing experience. Let's look at your connections in the industry. You have amazing connections, right? And they're like, yeah, actually, you're right. Maybe I can find another job. Maybe it's possible to work in an organization that's not toxic, right? It is, right? Yeah.
It's harder to see through it when you're in it.
Amen.
And that just speaks to the importance of a network, coaching, people that have a different perspective than you do, because you're in it, you're feeling it, as we've sort of talked about, whatever those feelings are defined.